for this second part of this afternoon's session, we now have journal editors to talk about their own experiences with holding the fort, I guess, in publishing and in especially during this period of the pandemic. So the order will just follow the one in the poster. We start with Dr. Patrick Campos for Humanities Diliman and Plaridel, and then we follow with Dr. Grace Barretto-Tesoro of Soksay Diliman and Vince Serrano of Kritika, Kultura, and then Nassef Adiong for the Journal of Islam and Asia. So Professor Patrick, can you start?
Hi, hello, Aaron, hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone, Grace, Vince. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
So I'll begin sharing my screen.
All right, there you go.
So I was specifically invited to speak about Humanities Demand, but I'd asked Aaron if I could also speak about a couple of other journals I've worked with or I'm currently working on. Since I suppose that most of our editorial processes will be more or less the same, I'd like to spend most of the time introducing these three journals and talking about kinds of articles we publish. So just to introduce myself again. So I'm currently the editor-in-chief of Humanities Demand, as well as Pelikula Journal. And I had just finished my very long term of managing Plaridel. So I was managing editor of Plaridel from 2013, I think, till last March. But I remain an associate editor. So I'd like to talk about these three journals. So Humanities Diliman. So this is what it looks like. Siguro germane to what we've been discussing in the previous panel. So Humanities Diliman publishes an electronic version as well as a print version. So the print version is a sight to behold because they really come in these pretty design versions. No? So most of the images are artworks that come from the Vargas Museum. So more or less, it also allows the editor to sort of imagine not only the specific issue at hand, but also to sort of summarize the times kung saan lumalabas yung journal. So this explains why the next three journal covers I'll be showing you, which I've edited, are a little more somber and dark. So some more about the journal. So it was established in the year 2000. To date, it has published 17 volumes, although there was a period, kaya 17 lang, that there's a period of a number of years when the journal did not publish volumes. It is published by the UP Diliman Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Development. And later I'll talk a little bit about the other journals that OVCRD publishes alongside Social Science Diliman. So Humanities Diliman is Scopus indexed. It is internationally refereed. So generally, I think it's best to bring this up now. So the thrust or the strength of Humanities Diliman really is in publishing articles and studies on Philippine topics in the humanities. Although since about 2016, we've been publishing articles beyond Philippine topics. No? So just quite recently. So if you visit the Humanities Diliman website, you'll find really a wealth of material on Philippine topics. But since we opened the journal to international topics as well, the refereeing process has been likewise international. So we come out semi-annually every June and December of the year. It's open access, as I've mentioned. There's a print version and there is an online version that's freely downloadable in PDF format. Siguro this is one of the peculiar things about Humanities Demand. We're trilingual. We publish in English and Filipino, and very rarely we publish in Spanish, in the Spanish language, as long as they're Philippine topics. And of course, they pass the refereeing process. We publish in Spanish as well. And we're multidisciplinary. So the main process of Humanities Diliman is published. I just use the term open articles, no? Which is to say we very rarely intervene in terms of what content to be published in a given issue. So most of these are um, open submissions that go through the refereeing process, and whichever articles get there first um, are published in a given volume. Although there's a limited degree in which I exercise some of this decision making in terms of uh, um, if a number of articles have reached the finish line, such as in this article, in this special issue, in this issue that I'm projecting now, there are a couple of articles on Duterte, and so I exercise that kind of decision to put them together and also to put them on top. But generally, so this is the limitation of curating it. And we also publish reviews of books, uh, exhibits, and other artistic or cultural production. Just to give you a sense of the kinds of articles we publish, so yeah, and I'll just project them. So we have a lot of studies on local theatrical tradition. In this case, we have one on traditional song lyrics in Aceh. So in this issue also of 2018, we have an article in the Spanish language of a public health book translated into Filipino, and we have some papers from a paper from Iran. So siguro that's another thing worth mentioning in the context of this conference is that many of the papers we get from beyond the Philippines are from Africa and Southeast Asia and from the Middle East. So here's another example of an issue 15.2 2018. So we have somebody, Jones Crisostomo, looking into the speeches and debates in the issue of the impeachment of Supreme Court Chief Justice Renato Corona. We have some literary studies, theatrical again. Okay, so just very quickly now. So we have some articles on short films from Davao, OFW play, theorizing on concepts of cultural performance, etc. So I go now to the next journal that I'd like to introduce. So this one's very dear to my heart. So because I come from the college which publishes Plaridel. So Plaridel is the name of the entire name of the journal is Plaridel, a Philippine Journal of Communication, Media, and Society. And as the name suggests, these are the kinds of articles we publish. And we publish articles that follow the whole gamut of kinds of researches in communication, media, and society. So including quantitative researches, communication research papers, and critical and cultural papers. So just also, I'm very happy with our covers. Just to note some. So in this case, we hire artists to imagine what the special issue is like. So the first one is about Korean pop culture, but in different cultures, crossing cultures. We have an issue on fan studies, fandom in Southeast Asia, and we have an issue on the film archival crisis in Southeast Asia. So hence the covers. So some more on Plaridel. Plaridel was established in 2004. We've published 17 volumes to date. It's published by the College of Mass Communication, UP Diliman, where I come from. Specifically, I come from the UP Film Institute. So the specific cover you're seeing is a special issue on Southeast Asian horror. Plaridel is Scopus Index as well as Web of Science Index. It's internationally refereed, so we publish uh, we publish on international topics and from authors from different parts of the world. We come out every June and December as well. We're open access. We used to print the journal, but distribution and getting the inventory moving is very difficult. And we've realized that we gain more reach and citation when we went online. So what we did was digitize everything from 2004 up to the present, so they're all available online. We're bilingual. We publish in Filipino and English, and we're multidisciplinary as well. So what's the difference between Humanities Diliman and Plaridel is that Plaridel also does a lot of special issues. So what it does is in a given issue, we divide the issue into two sections. One is for usually a special issue with a guest editor, and then we have a section for open articles, or these articles that were submitted through the usual process. We also, in addition to reviews, we publish interviews, roundtable discussions. We also publish lectures. Siguro in particular or of note are the lectures delivered by our Gawad Plaridel awardees. So the UP system and the College of Mass Communication, we hold the Gawad Plaridel, which is kind of lifetime achievement award to media practitioners, and they give a lecture each time an awardee receives an award, and we publish those lectures. Also publish documents like annotations of law, like media law, or different kinds of hybrid articles. So I just a note also on the cover. So this our most recent issue that just came out last June is on Duterte and disinformation, edited by Josa Labiste, and this is an image from Rafi Lerma photograph of a woman widowed by the drug war. I'm not going to share screen anymore. You can check out the website for more articles, but just to give you an idea, so this is one special issue I edited. So shows you the breadth and the scope of so again, I'll breeze through this one. I'll go through this very quickly. So this is the process. It's a two-step double-blind peer review process. Two-step because from the time an article submitted goes through associate editors that vet the paper and decide if it must go through peer review. So if it gets through, then there's a peer review, usually two peer reviewers. Then if it gets past that, then etc. So I'm sure all of our other colleagues will discuss this at length later. But very soon, I don't know if Kritika Kultura is using Scholar One, but a number of Diliman journals will be using Scholar One, so we're transitioning. So this is a kind of automated process. It's essentially the same process, except a lot of the communication is automated and more efficient. But we're not yet there, but we're getting there. Just a bit more. So Humanities Diliman and Plaridel are UP Diliman journals, of which there are almost 40, over 35 journals of different topics. Just to show you some of them. Asian Studies, one of the oldest of the Diliman journals. It's now in its 52nd volume. Diliman Gender Review from the Gender Office. Kasarinlan from the Third World Studies Center. Likhaan, of course, publishes creative works. Daluyan, solely publishing articles in Filipino, and Science Diliman. The last journal that I'd like to introduce, and I'll be very quick now because my time is almost up, is Pelikula Journal. We're very, very, very happy with this one. So Pelikula Journal was originally published from 1999 to 2001 by the College of Mass Comm and the Film Department. We relaunched it in 2019 in time for the Philippine Cinema Centennial. So this cover shows us the father of Philippine cinema, so-called father of Philippine cinema, Jose Nepomuceno, with his wife Isabel Acuña, whom we know very little about, but who's actually a producer and a very, very close partner of Jose Nepomuceno. So we have a lot of historical articles featured in this first volume. So the second volume is up to date. It's the 2020 volume that goes up to the pandemic and what the film sector has been doing to respond to issues, social issues. What's different with Pelikula is that it's fully curated. We accept submissions, but they go through the editorial team, and we work with the authors very closely. It's also because Pelikula Journal encourages scholarship in Philippine cinema, so we're open to accepting papers from those who've never published, who have no track record, but who have have produced important researches. To date, we have 2 volumes, the 2 covers you've just seen, and it's now currently published by the UP Film Institute, hopefully to be supported by the National Culture for Communication, for NCCA, National Commission for Culture and the Arts. So just to show you that the draft of the table of contents of the 2 volumes. So they're mainly Philippine cinema topics or researches. So we publish straightforward journal researches. We publish opinion, interviews, film reviews, and photo essays or visual essays. This is for volume 2. Okay, so that's it. My time is up. Thank you for letting me introduce these 3 journals.
All right, thank you, Professor Campos. So we will address some of the questions being raised right now at the Q&A platform during the Q&A portion. Now let's proceed to Professor Grace Barretto-Tesoro, the editor of Social Science, Diliman. Grace?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll start to share my screen. All right. I'll share. Wait. Ano ba siya, slide?
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. Yeah. All right.
All right. So good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to Aaron Malyari for inviting me to talk about social science Diliman. So I'm Grace Barretto-Tesoro from the Archaeological Studies program here in UP Diliman. And I am the current editor-in-chief of Social Science Diliman. Prior to this, I was the editor of Hukay, which is published by our unit, and it's a archaeology journal. So the complete name of the journal is Social Science Diliman, a Philippine journal of society and change. And at the moment, our current volume is volume 19, number 1. So what do we publish in Social Science Diliman? We publish articles, of course, on the social sciences. It's internationally refereed. It comes out twice a year, in June and in December. It's bilingual. So we accept articles in English and Filipino, but Filipino articles should be accompanied by an English abstract and English keywords. So the article should be broad enough to be understood by people from other parts or different fields of the social sciences. So it should be interesting to other scholars beyond a specific field in a specific time frame in a specific geography. We also publish book reviews. So we provide the books, and usually the reviewer they get to keep the book as a token. So we do not charge for anything. So like in other journals, they would request a donation for colored printing or other related charges. But if you um, if you contribute a manuscript to Social Science Diliman, it is going to be published for free. The editorial board are composed of the following. So, of course, myself as the editor-in-chief, there are several associate editors. We have several members of the International Advisory Board affiliated with different institutes and universities in the world. We have one editorial assistant who will guide the contributor throughout the review process. There's a managing editor. We have manuscript editors or copy editors, one in the Filipino language and one editor for the English language, and of course, a layout artist. So I just want to go, for those who have not yet submitted or have no experience in submitting an article to a journal, I just want to go through this process. So step one is the article will be assessed by myself, and then I will see if it can be published or it needs to go back to the author. And if it can be published, if I think it is publishable or there's a potential for it to be published, I forward it to one of the associate editors is uh, who also belongs to the same field or knows about the topic for preliminary review, and we follow a double-blind review process. If the preliminary reviewer has questions or he can reject the article or has questions or suggests revisions, we we return the article to the author for revisions. And then again, after the author returns it to us, we evaluate it again if he or she was able to answer the comments of the preliminary reviewer. If it's successful at this stage, then we forward it to the external reviewers. Okay. Again, we follow a double-blind review policy. The external reviewers are given a month, so it takes a long time for the process. But some reviewers would submit it earlier than the deadline. So it goes through the same process. So we receive the comments from the external reviewers, and then they're forwarded to the authors for revisions. I evaluate them, and then if all revisions were completed or done, we forward them to the copy editor. This can take several rounds, and then the final evaluation is, of course, by the editor-in-chief, and then, of course, it goes to the layout. The specific guidelines can be seen on this link. So you can just type Social Science Diliman on your web browser, and it will give you the link to the guidelines. We accept articles any time of the year, so you can submit anytime. But of course, this article should not have been previously published or submitted simultaneously to another journal. Okay? And there are ways for us to find out if the article submitted has been published. So again, we accept articles in English or in Filipino. You should add the bio note, and you follow the Chicago Manual of Style, the 16th edition. So there are some tips. So this is one of the requests of Aaron. Make sure that the title of your article should appeal to a general audience, meaning someone outside your field should be interested in reading your article. Make sure you provide sufficient background to your topic, including definitions of terms. Always remember that not all your readers will be specialists in the field, and therefore they would need the appropriate and adequate background to your topic. Explain why your topic is important to specialists and non-specialists. Remember, you are talking not just to Filipinos, but to an international audience, and you are talking to non-specialists also. And you want to get your message across. What is the relevance of your topic, not just in your field, but beyond your field, beyond your area of study. Always provide a theoretical framework. We sometimes get articles um, with with just discussing the results of their analysis, but there is no theoretical framework in terms of discussing the results and the relevance of the results. Make sure that your objectives and methods are clear. You describe the nature of your data, how was it collected, and make sure to discuss also your sample size, if what's the rationale behind the sample size. Of course, discuss the results of analysis, and then you give recommendations. What were the limitations of your study, what you haven't done, what you want to do in the future or others to do in the future that will add or expand your current study. Make sure that your figures, tables, and charts have appropriate captions and they appear where they should be, where they should appear, where they are relevant in the text. Cite all references and of course list them at the end of the paper, because this will help you avoid plagiarism. And of course, lastly, do not forget to include an acknowledgement section. All the people who help you in preparing and writing the manuscript. So this is our contact emails. So if you wish to submit a manuscript, you can send them to me directly or to Social Science Diliman. So it's there, so you can just print, screen, or copy it. So thank you very much, and I think we have more time for questions and answers later. Aaron, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. All right. Thank you, Dr. Grace, for the introduction to Soksay Diliman. We now proceed with Serrano to talk about Kritika Kultura. We go across Katipunan this time.
Okay. Right. Can you see my screen and can you hear me?
Yes.
Are we good? Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
Thanks. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone, to my co-panelists and to the attendees of the conference. Thank you as well to Aaron for the invitation to talk about critical cultura within the context of a conference on decolonizing global studies. Okay, I suppose a topic which is close to the heart of Kritika Kultura. Aaron asked me to talk about 3 topics, and this is the outline of my discussion this afternoon. I suppose I must ask for your indulgence if the some of what I'm going to say will already have been mentioned by Patrick and by Grace earlier. So apologies for that in advance. Okay, so I'll just talk about a brief introduction to Kritika Kultura, our publication system and editorial process, okay, as well as tips on transforming your paper into a journal article. Okay, so first, about KK. So our first issue came out in February 2002, and our latest issue, which was just uploaded last month, it's now issue number 35, came out in August 2020. Our founding editor and currently editor emerita is Professor Maria Luisa Torres Reyes, who is now the editor-in-chief of Unitas and the scholar in residence at UST. Although she confers with the current editorial board time and again for further, for further advice, consultations, and so on and so forth. So in 2002, Professor Reyes envisioned Kritika Kultura as an online-only, open-access, peer-reviewed journal, okay, in literary language and cultural studies. And I suppose this is part of, as an aside, this is part of the disciplinal specialties of the Department of English in Ateneo. We do have in terms of our academic programs, literary language and cultural studies. And I suppose in 2002, Professor Reyes saw this as kind of like an organic outcropping already in terms of the academic strengths of the department and transitioning to international journal publication. That said, of course, Professor Reyes envisioned the journal to be international in scope, and you can see from our international board of editors, as well as our guest editors from our various special sections or forum critica, as we call it. We try to be very capacious, so to speak, in terms of not just the topics, but also the kind of like geographical interests that we might have. Okay, and at the same time, not only being international or global in this sense, we would also like to address emerging topical, theoretical, and methodological concerns in the Philippines and Southeast Asia specifically. But given our readership and our emerging body of contributors, no, I'll show you some percentages of our readerships. No, given our shall we say range of readers and contributors, we find that we get a lot of contributors from North America, Europe, and the global South more broadly. This is just a list of very short list of a number of the established and emerging academics and creative writers, because we also do have a literary section, who have graced our pages, so including Epifania San Juan, Bian Lumbera, Vicente Rafael, Blisco Walim, Carolyn Howe, Bowman has published with us, Patrick Flores has published with us, Nefertiti Diar also, John Blanco, Patrick also has published with us, Oscar Campomanes, Roland Tolentino, Jeffrey Arellano Cabusao, Conchitina Cruz, Jan Betens from Belgium, Jonathan Beller, Joel David, Chaya Jacobo, among like a host of other established and emerging academics and literary writers. I mentioned earlier that we have a section on special section that we call Forum Critica. A number of the topics in our Forum Critica include Chinese diaspora in the Philippines, performance and domination, Carlos Bulosan, recent scholarship on Carlos Bulosan, Christianity and Nation in Southeast Asia, Asian hybridities, crisis in urban democracy, so on and so forth. So in this sense, and I'll explain this in a bit, these Forum Critica sections are guest edited special sections, and we defer, of course, to the expertise of the guest editors. We also defer to the networks of reviewers and possibly authors of the guest editors. And in a sense, like we allow them full latitude of their expertise when they propose and operationalize a Forum Critica for us. These are the sections of Kritika Kultura. So we do have, I think, in Humanities Diliman, I think Patrick calls it the open section. We just call it our regular section. No? Parang it's undifferentiated articles that we get in our email address, okay, a slush file if you'd like. No. The regular section is typically, the articles in the regular section are typically 7,000 to 8,000 words. Okay, and as I said, they focus on any aspect of literary language and cultural studies. We have a more specific section on which we call the monograph section on transnationalism, diaspora, and identity. And this caters to, I think, in the earlier panel, there was an initiative called Palgrave Pivot. I think one of the editors was talking about that, and it in the sense it's kind of like an intermediary stage insofar in terms of word count, insofar as it's not as long as a book, but not as short as an article. And the monograph section of Kritika Kultura caters to that particular latitude and capaciousness in terms of the author, like demonstrating an argument at length, okay, marshaling more evidence, okay, demonstrating an acuity in terms of theory and method and so on and so forth within the space of 15 to 20,000 words. As mentioned, we also have a literary section, so poetry, fiction, essays, and works in translation. Okay, works in any Philippine language or international language, published. Translated into English. Okay, right. We have a section for graduate students, and this is called the New Scholars Forum. The Forum Kritika is the guest edited special section. And we have an initiative for literary works with tie up with Ateneo Press, and this is the first book prize. Okay, right. As an aside, our founding editor envisioned KK not just to be a venue for publication, but also a venue for, in so to speak, like the public humanities. So we do have live events, or had, to be more precise, because the pandemic pretty much shut us down. But prior to the pandemic, we had, a robust series of conferences, lecture series, reading series, and for a time, I think running for around 3 years, a manuscript development workshop. Okay, and the participants of the workshop, following peer review, could get published in KK. Okay, right. We are indexed in MLA, Clarivate, Scopus, EBSCO, Directory of Open Access, and the International Consortium of Critical Theory programs. Okay, this is our readership. I don't know if this will matter to the current attendees, but for what it's worth, no, these are top 10 readerships in terms of countries: Philippines, US, Indonesia, Australia, UK, India, Canada, South Korea, Singapore, and Germany. And I suppose this would also account, no, for from our from our insiders' point of view, like we do see a lot of contributions from Indonesia and South Korea, okay, and like a good number of contributors from India as well, okay, and their manuscripts are in various stages of evaluation already, okay, but for those intending to publish with Kritika Kultura, we do mention this from the get-go, okay, and I'll show you that in my section on the tips, okay. Very quickly, just to give you an idea of the kind of like wide-ranging interests of Kritika Kultura. This is our table of contents from our past 2 issues. Our double issue 33 and 34, published in 2019 and 2020. And later on, our most recent issue, KK35. Okay, so just they're all available in the website. Anyway, this is an open access journal, so if you'd like to just go there. Okay, so I think I have few minutes left. Okay, but yeah. And these are the topics of the Forum Critica's: interdisciplinarity in Philippine academia, emerging issues in literary studies in the 21st century, a special issue on food transformations, food security, globalization, okay, and a section on historical dialogue and memory studies. Okay, the monograph section, as seen here, literary section, okay, and this is the table of contents of our most recent issue, number 35. There. Just a brief rundown of the events up to March, okay, before we were all quarantined. So we are discovering, of course, that that the events give us, more opportunities for networking, more opportunities to be introduced to emerging research, okay, emerging research in our colleagues, from our colleagues' perspectives, okay, right, and it in a sense like generates further publicity for the journal, okay. Right. These are our just to give a foretaste of future special sections in Kritika Kultura. We are in discussions already with the guest editors, and please anticipate in future issues of Kritika Kultura these special sections in the upcoming issues. Okay, right. This is our publication system and editorial process. This is the part which might seem repetitive already, but like a number of publishing houses and journals, we have an internal review. Okay, so the internal review is usually done by myself, our managing editors, and if it does not fall within our expertise, we usually ask experts within the field to do the internal review for us. Once it passes internal review, either it, from the get go, it's already worth reviewing. Then it gets to the it goes to the external reviewers. Otherwise, the manuscript reverts back to the author for revisions prior to external review. Then we have external review, which is double blind. We typically get one reviewer from the Philippines and one reviewer abroad. Okay, I think that's um, that's our tendency already. Then after that revision, the author revises to the satisfaction of the KK editors, the reviewers, and of course the author. Okay, then acceptance and followed by production, which entails copy editing, proofreading, and layout. Okay, right. So I'm down to my last section. Eh, I phrase this in terms of not exactly tips, but what we look for as editors. We're looking for a clear and solid argument or proposition already. Okay. Secondly, we're also looking for a clear substantive explanation of the theoretical and methodological apparatus used by the researcher. We're also looking for a substantive review of related literature, and this is where the international aspect of KK comes in. We would like parang we would like our authors to ground their studies within published sources already, in order for them to contextualize for a Philippine audience by and large, as well as for an international audience, where the readers might locate those particular research that they want to publish in. Item number 4, we're looking for well-argued, persuasive, and well-supported analysis. Okay. And finally, we're looking for articles which are of interest and significance to our readers. Okay. As well as of significance to emerging topics. Okay. In the disciplines of literary language and cultural studies. Okay. Right. So our contact details are in the website. Okay, our manuscript submission guidelines are also in the website. So just Google search Kritika Kultura and then just go to the pertinent subsection there. Thanks everyone.
All right, thank you, Vincenz. So we go now to our last presenter, Nassef Adiong, who is editing a relatively new journal, International Journal of Islam and Asia. Nassef?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this Journal Publishing Forum. The International Journal of Islam and Asia, is a new journal which I created firstly in collaboration with two of my cohorts at the Islam and International Relations Research Cohort. Dean Abdul Kader, who is now a fellow at Harvard University in the Divinity School, but she's working at the University of Massachusetts and also with Rafael Maurelio, who had finished his studies from Italy and is now based in Tehran. And three of us had, and currently co-editing the articles that we receive for this journal. And here are the types. Firstly, I try to, invite many scholars as possible to help the creation of the journal. So before coordinating this or negotiating with a Western publisher who is more, could help in bringing in and also sustaining the journal. Um, so supposed to be called as Journal of Islam in Asia, but there is one journal that is currently, I think, existing in Malaysia, and which is also has the same name. So we just included and added the word international to make it more fluent from distinctive from the Journal of Islam in Asia in Malaysia. So anything that goes, any disciplines, fields of works, and theories or knowledges, uh, whether existing, applied, or trying to create new knowledge and grounds, cutting edge and original research are welcome to submit their proposal for the International Journal of Islam in Asia. And I've also coordinated this, engaged with some new names, well-known scholars who agreed to be part of the new journal. As you have here, associate editors Alatas, Al-Ani, Khairuddin, Jocelyn Cesari, Kevin, Tariq, Miriam. These are very, very well-known scholars in Islam and Islamic studies, but not only in terms of theology, philosophy, but also in cultures and other aspects of knowledge. At the side of the editorial advisory board, these are also the people who also agreed to be part of the advisory board. So you have here a very, I think, um, uh, international advisors and editors that would help in trying to review the quality of the proposals. And aside from this, which is very helpful for the IJIA, is that since the negotiation with Brill, I've also Brill has also very helpful in making an editorial manager system that is very helpful for us editors to review, to communicate with many proposals. So I'm going to share with you the editorial manager system that Brill is using. So you have here the editorial manager of Brill. Brill is, I think, one of the oldest publishers in the world, and its extensive networks and comprehensive publications and strength in publishing are more on in the humanities and social sciences, including law. Now, one thing that the proposal, the author would need to do is to log in or create a register here at the editorial manager system, and as an author. We also invite reviewers and other that could help for the sustainability of the journal. So if someone would ask about instructions for authors, it's also here. It's accessible here, and also overview of the journal. They're also accessible here. So this is the website of the new journal of Islam in Asia. I think one of the difficulties that I've encountered here is to get the confirmation of reviewers, because most, if not all, reviewers that I'm seeking out are the prominent reviewers that would somehow help in creating a good quality research in this journal. And most of them are very busy, preoccupied with many things. So that was a challenge for me and with my co-editors to seek out their confirmations and agree to review the articles. And also one thing that I also would like to add on is I'm trying to find a balanced way, a balance of references that used by the author. As much as possible, it should be 60% or sources originating from the global north, since it talks about Islam in Asia, it has to be a balance of sources coming from the global south, from the Islamic world or Muslim world. And also, one of the challenges that I've also encountered is to have a good copy editing process for the articles, because most of the articles that we receive have Arabic terms, not only in Arabic, but also in Farsi and also in Urdu, and also in Bahasa. So our copy editor, who is very fluent in those languages, were very, very helpful in copy editing the articles, which has many extensive Arabic, Persian, Turkish as well, and Urdu and also Bahasa languages. So I guess that's it for this new journal. We're hoping to release the first issue at the end of this year. And when the issue is released, we're also going to have a podcast with the authors, one by one. Each of the authors that has successfully passed the scrutiny of the journal will have a podcast for them, so that we can also have a balance of language, how academic language is being understood by the public. So not entirely in terms of using an academist language, but how it could relate to the public and be understood in the public. So we'll have those kind of platforms, podcasts, or video conferencing, and upload it in the YouTube channel. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nassef. So we have around 30 minutes for question and answer open forum. So I'd like to start, if I may. So all of you have shared what the journals are looking for in terms of the manuscripts, how to prepare them. I would like to ask, what would make you, of course you could just say a negation of what you said a while ago, but what would make you reject an article? What are the red flags that would usually authors should avoid in order to not get the desk rejection, if I may use the term? Maybe we can start with Dr. Grace.
Oh, sorry. I expected Patrick to answer first. Number one is because we have a required number of words, so word count. So it should meet the word count. So it's 5,000 to 5. Well, what is on the website is 7 to 10,000 words, but I see that in other journals, many of the journals I've encountered or I've read, they accept 5,000 words now, and some even less, 3,000 words. But it should be 5,000. So that's the first thing that we look for. And then if it matches, of course, the word count, I go through the different parts of the paper and see if it's complete, meaning it has the introduction, the basic parts of a journal article. And then, of course, I go through it. And then if it, of course, makes sense to me, then I forward it to a preliminary reviewer. But of course, because I come from a different field, archaeology, so we need to, of course, we rely on specialists in the field. So we start with the preliminary reviewer and, of course, the external reviewers. But it should have the complete parts of a journal article. It doesn't need to follow the exact words like introduction, background, relevant related literature, but those should be in the manuscript.
Right.
Yeah. I'd like to say a few things. No. Siguro yun, it's quite common that we get articles that do not follow just the minimum requirements that are already listed in the website, right? So from that would be desk reject, as Aaron used the term. Desk reject is like, we're not even going to consider this because it didn't even follow the minimum requirements. But what I found interesting is that when we transition from being not indexed in international indexes to being indexed. So something happened. No? So Plaridel, for example, I was with Plaridel before we were indexed in Scopus and the SCI and EBSCO and all these indexes. And we would get a steady stream of submissions, but not a lot, right? So we would get a number, and the ratio of rejection and acceptance would be, well, not so high, but the moment we got indexed internationally, then all these articles start coming in, right? Like, uh, we received so much volume of articles, and um, the desk reject would come in the form of articles that really do not fall within the kinds of articles we publish. So they will try anyway, right? So you get these articles that, uh, if you check the journal, we don't publish this kind of topic, but they will try anyway. So a lot of these desk rejects are like that. So and then of course, naturally, because a lot of submissions are coming in, the ratio becomes higher, right? So there's more rejection in that case. Um, so in Humanities Diliman, it's actually more peculiar because we get more submissions from outside the Philippines. Of topics that we never publish. No? They're not even humanities papers, right? So, but we would get like, we would be flooded. Some days there would be like a lot of them coming in. So these would be rejected from the get go. So I just want to make that observation that I'm sure a lot of scholars are looking for an outlet where they can call their publication an international publication for whatever that's worth, and sometimes they're not very careful with choosing the right journal where they can publish the work that they do. So perhaps they're looking for like, siguro in keeping with the context of the conference. So they're looking for, ano ba dito yung mga bansa na may international journal pero Pilipinas, yung mga ganyan, no? So and then they would submit all these articles na iisip mo parang, how did they even think about submitting it in the first place? So my guess is really because I was able to observe it, it's the international factor that comes in, right? So this is really because I saw it transition from not a lot to like super many. So, yeah.
All right. Vincenz?
Yeah. Yes, of course. We already do desk rejects for articles that don't comply to the format. But we've also noticed a trend in articles which are worthy, of possible publication. However, do not fit the research interests of our journal. Okay, so top of mind example would be like an article which appears to lean more on the social sciences, but does not usually show say like theoretical or methodological protocols of the humanities. Okay, so in that sense, like for terms of practical considerations, like we wouldn't have too many reviewers for that. Okay, and secondly, in terms of our editorial interests, it won't necessarily follow. Okay, so I'm not sure the author would be best served by a readership which may not actually like read him or her. Okay, right. So there's that. Other things. Articles which aren't well written. Okay, I mean we are a humanities journal, after all, and also articles which appear to have dealt with that particular topic already. And this is where I think just a segue, like very niftily to the Q&A. James has a question on the necessity of conducting a literature review. That's one of the things we spot actually in KK. We look at the literature review of the author and see if he or she like knows the field. No, parang hindi lang pwedeng analyze lang basta-basta in that sense, no. Because in that sense, however whatever percentage it occupies the total word count, we still need to see evidence of having paid intellectual debts in that sense, and at the same time, more than that intellectual debt payment, we also need evidence of the author locating his or her research within the field. And that for us is the function of the literature review. So that's one of the things we also look at, no? Parang if it's like, you know, if the author can actually create his or her own space in the discipline. Okay.
All right. Nassef, would you like to add anything?
Yes, we tend to argue. I tend to argue with my co-editors and also associate editors because as my decolonial research agenda that I'm trying to bring about and put advance in my decision making, and I'm trying to negotiate that with Brill that we don't necessarily follow the Western standards of strictly this kind of 5 thesis chapters where there is literature review methods and other. The very most important for me is the content and substance and the originality of the research and how cohesive has been presented in the submission and in the content. So we're not really following what is the Western standard, strictly following in this kind of, because we have been influenced so much of these Western standards in publication. Peer review, which Barry told us that started in 1625 at the Oddenberg Convention, that it has to be peer reviewed. But if we're going to trace that with the Muslim civilizations scholarship and how also Chinese scholars and also Indian scholars have contributed in the area of knowledge creation, it has also different culture of scholarship, especially in the Muslim world. So we're trying to also balance that kind of Western standards of how knowledge is validated, how knowledge is generated with the Muslim civilizational experiences. So that's the reason why I'm very much more particular with references, the sources, and the cohesion in the argument. So not really following with if there is literature review or not. Because literature review, you cannot find this, I think, in some Western scholarship, even in Germany, as Frankie told us, that it's not that common, the review of literature, even in the Muslim world, I think. So trying to find a balance because we have a Western publisher, Brill, and also the experiences of 1400 years of Muslim scholarship in knowledge creation and production.
All right. Allow me to dovetail from what Nassef said about contending with Western publishers and being scholars from the global South, for example. How do you see the idea about citation indices? I mean, 2 of the journals here, Kritika, Kultura, and Humanities Diliman and Claridel, have qualified for Web of Science and Scopus already, and Soksai Diliman is on its way. Do you see any particular challenge or maybe even problem or limitation to subscribing to this particular citation indices or metrics, since this is in line with our conference, Decolonizing Global Studies? I mean, if we are to continuously subscribe to this particular rubric, how does it affect our knowledge production?
May I also add something to that? There are many national indices across Southeast Asia. I think Thailand has one. I'm not sure if Malaysia or Indonesia has one, or possibly both. And in the Philippines, we don't seem to have a national index for journal publishing. And it also makes us want to always line ourselves up with Scopus, which is we know that it's very positivist, and we know that it's very difficult to get this kind of ranking. And yet somehow we are interpolated into doing that kind of thing, into this neoliberal commodification of scholarship without developing our own national indices. And we also know that Scopus is very Anglo-centric to a certain degree, very Eurocentric. So I'm wondering why these initiatives that are more developmental in nature, that try to encourage younger publishers, for example, to get into the publishing world, pushing for maybe national or regional indexing for Southeast Asia and the Philippines have not really been progressing in this country. And I've asked this at several forums, and I'm not sure if the answer is politics, if it's some kind of jealousies, professional jealousy, some kind of unwillingness to work with other universities, because we know this happens in the Philippines. In fact, we've experienced it at this conference with some people who I shall not mention, but I don't know why it's not happening. It's not supposed to be based on egoistic or egocentric, interest, but more of the national or at least developing scholarship throughout the Philippines and involving, maybe even many publishers outside of Metro Manila who are not getting their voices heard. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts about this indexing issue.
So can I give you
course.
first?
Yeah.
So,
Coming from the editor from a journal that transitioned to from.
Yeah. That's right. So I just a quick remark on Frankie's question. I can't answer it really, but I know that there had been efforts in the past. Like I forget the name, Philippine. It should have been Philippine Citation Index or something. There was the CHED kind of listing, which has been discontinued. There is the ACI, the one based in Thailand, which is really seeking to create a kind of Southeast Asian consortium. It's called ACI. We are part of that. I suppose Kritika Kultura is part of that, but nothing much has happened since. No? So it's called ASEAN Citation Index, and they index journals in languages in Southeast Asia. So I'm not sure. I can't answer why they don't prosper. For sure, politics is partly there, incompetence or whatever. But going back to the question of Aaron earlier, so there has really been resistance from some of the faculty when we first decided to try to apply for Scopus or Web of Science. And the resistance, I think, is clear to all of us. It's because exactly what you've mentioned. It's like subjecting our journal to scrutiny of these institutions that know nothing about Philippine realities, for example, etc. And one of the ways by which we tried to keep the identity that made us who we are before these indexing would be to publish in bilingual, or in case of Humanities Demand trilingual. We publishing in the Filipino language, I think, is one of the strongest statements. In fact, there was a time, although we discontinued it because of logistical and so there's a lot of issue in translation, but we used to translate entire articles from Filipino to English. Pero there's a lot of conflict in the translation process, right? I'm sure Vince knows this. When the translator and the scholar can't agree, but all these efforts to make the Philippine language foregrounded, and of course the Philippine topics are foregrounded in all the journals that I'm involved with. So you would get these certain topics, sort of a margin, but they're mostly Philippine topics. So that's one, I think. But the question of, for example, Daluyan, which only publishes articles in Filipino, they will never be indexed, right? So this becomes really a clear issue for a journal like Daluyan. I'd also like to mention one practical thing. So Vince mentioned earlier this notion of being well written, right? So of course we will all agree it's well argued, all the points are there, but some authors that come from non-English speaking or countries that are not mainly English speaking, they would turn in sometimes really badly written papers in terms of grammar, right? But if you read through them, you realize there's really much in this paper that needs to be put out there. So sometimes, even if it's a more difficult process, we would stick to it and work with this author to see it through. Sometimes the language part becomes the screen. When it's so badly written, you just let it go from the get-go. But we've seen some instances where papers that were not written really well in the English language, so much promise. Um, so that takes a much longer process. Everything is longer. The refereeing, the preliminary revisions, the copy editing. There's a lot of like, what did you mean by this kind of thing that we would, in other instances, we would rather not do, because I mean, if it's badly written, then just reject it, right? So, but if it says something, for example, about specific culture that I think is understudied, then we would support it, right? So these are like maybe particular ways that we can still show this aspect of, let's say, Humanities Demand and Plaridel, even if they're indexed in these indices.
All right. Thank you, Professor Campos. Vincenz, would you like to add anything?
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there.
Okay. It's a double-edged sword for us, and it's quite ambivalent about. I'm quite ambivalent about all of this, like, citation, these metrics, this H indexes, and so on and so forth. It's clear to me personally that it's part of our academic industry. Okay, so it's if you like it's a particular institutional dominant that we're in. Okay, and for me it factors in not just publication but also promotions, employment, and so on and so forth. Diba? Parang you'll see the rewards being given to articles which are published, diba? In Scopus or Clarivate in indexed journals, and then lesser monetary rewards and so on and so forth for articles which are published in other indexes. So parang I think we need to lay bare first, diba? Parang the kind of like environment, the academic environment we're in. Okay, and I suppose, and this is where my ambivalence na comes in, di ba? Parang as an author, where would you choose to, where would you pick your spot na, di ba? Kasi that it's like, yung parang if you have a manuscript and then you're deciding which particular journal to publish in, diba? Parang it will have effects not just in terms of the field that you want to intervene in, but it will have impacts, diba? On career, things like that, diba? So yeah, so parang it's such a complex issue. Yeah, and I do think parang having had discussions like years ago, I think I was invited to some meetings about the ACI, but I'm not sure that prospered, and so on and so forth. I think SHED had some initiatives. We were called to a meeting, if I'm not mistaken, like in Cebu, like where we met other journal editors. But I'm not sure if national initiatives or regional initiatives will have that sort of momentum. No, so parang yeah, yeah, I'll stop there for now. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Grace?
I follow Vincenz. I'm ambivalent also. As editor, of course, I want the journal to be indexed. It's for wider readership and for more people to know about the journal and for more contributions. Okay. As a faculty of UP, of course, you get rewards in terms of promotions, in terms of there's a monetary reward also if you publish in an index journal. But as a scholar, okay, I have a problem with that because you don't get rewards for publishing in an all Filipino or in all Filipino journal, and I think that is one of the problems or challenges that we face in social science Diliman, because we do publish Filipino articles or articles in the Filipino language, and Scopus is of course questioning that. So I think it's all for metrics, it's all for university ranking, it's business, it's capitalism. But I think if it's a really good article, it doesn't matter where it's published. If it was peer reviewed, people will read it.
All right.
That's my point. That's
All right.
that's what I want to say.
Thank you. I think Nassef has made clear his point a while ago, and he mentioned that he's been having even debates with his publishers about this. So I'd like to move away a little bit from this very discursively charged topic, and maybe I would like to ask the editors in this panel, how has the global pandemic affected the operations of the journal? Has it been because we've heard the academic publishers in the earlier session that they've had difficulties proceeding since the lockdowns have been imposed. So I would like to know if the same went for is still going on for journals. Maybe we start now with Dr. Grace.
In Okay, when we started, of course, the contributors, they will contribute, but I think our main challenge is with reviewers, and of course there's a gender issue also. Gender issue meaning, of course, females tend to do more work, they have more mental load working from home. So in our letters, we always ask them if they have time, and we acknowledge that there is a pandemic. If they have time to review the paper, if not, then they can perhaps recommend another a potential reviewer, or if they need more time. The old policy was to give 2 weeks to reviewers to read the article and to submit a review. And then many reviewers are asking for extensions because of the transition to online teaching and of the many webinars that they have to attend here in UP. So, and I'm sure not just in UP, but in other universities also. So now we are giving them more time. So I think that's the direct effect of the pandemic in the review process.
All right, Professor Campos.
Yeah, there was some effect. I'm sure it has more to do with more time, giving people more time, asking them if they could review. Although I was really surprised that it's really more from personal, individual, subjective experience, right? That as you're suffering through the pandemic to receive this much papers still, right? Like I would receive these submissions and just wonder what are these people doing, right? So in a way, it didn't stop. The whole process slowed down, but the submissions, they're still there. The review process, we still put out some our last issues. It's just more taxing for the editorial team, I think, to be working in such a condition. That's the difficult part. But I'd like to mention a couple of specific experiences that I've had with Claridel and Pelicula during the pandemic. So we started working on the volumes prior to the pandemic, but as the pandemic came in and we saw a lot of issues that erupted in the Philippines particularly, right? So anti-terror law and all these things. And we were particularly working on volumes that involved Duterte and politics, etc. So for these issues that we were working on, these articles, we were more charged, we were more fired up. We wanted to really put this out as quickly as possible. So there's that kind of element when you have special issues, I think, as opposed to working, for example, within a very open structure and you don't know really what comes out, right? So, but even in Humanities Diliman, I was able to do that. We found a couple of papers that were just very nearly the finish line, and we thought these are the right papers for this specific moment in history. And so, so these little things, I think they matter. For example, in this situation of the pandemic, to have released the Duterte and Disinformation special issue, I think it really matters. We are able to recall all these things that are the background of today in actual researches and well-written papers. So so this makes it worthwhile. So I was saying a little while ago, it's been quite taxing to be working on journals during this pandemic, but this makes it worthwhile.
All right. Vincenz?
Yeah. Um, because Kritika Kultura was online to begin with, I think I wouldn't say it didn't matter, no, but we had an easier time transitioning from pre-pandemic to pandemic because we already had our editorial work and our production work for most part is already conducted online to begin with. Having said that, we had to exercise much sensitivity in terms of, in terms of the various editorial and production tasks. Most of our editors and staff members, at least the core members and core staff, are also teachers. And as mentioned, with the shift to online learning, it's like people want to focus more on their learning management system as opposed to like doing editorial work for the time being. So a little more in this case, no, parang adjustment, a little more sensitivity when it comes to the because as editors, you're not just managing the manuscripts, you're also managing your stuff. So parang paano to, 'di ba? So hindi naman tipong before, 'di ba, na tipong makikita mo naman sa department tapos pwede mo kumustahin and so on and so forth. Now it's like, we're all technologically mediated. So a lot of the spaces we had for socialization, such as, cafeterias and departments, aren't just there. So that's one factor to consider. A second, and this is just my second one. As I mentioned, Kritika Kultura focuses not just on publication but also on events. And our last activity was early March, diba? And then we've had a hard time transitioning to um, to online events. Okay, for obvious reasons, diba? 'Cause we've had to diba, in terms of triage, no, we have to prioritize teaching first before we can actually even imagine like online events for KK. But we're working on it. We'll see what happens. Diba? Parang the pandemic really cut short a lot of the activities we had planned for the year. Like we were co-organizing with colleagues in Indonesia a conference in Jakarta. We were organizing a workshop during the summer. Parang these major activities obviously didn't happen anymore. So yun muna. Parang yeah, that's where we're at in terms of the pandemic. So again, in a nutshell, editorial work and production work are still ongoing. But in terms of events, which Critical Culture sees also as an integral component of its identity, have stopped for the time being.
All right. Nassef, how about for a journal that is just starting? How has the pandemic affected the operations?
Not so much. I think only in the review process, because there were many reviewers were asking for more time, considering the times that we are living into. So only in the review process that the new journal has affected with this pandemic situation.
All right. Thank you. So maybe we have one more question that I could throw into to the panelists. On a lighter note, since one of the main goals of this forum is to acquaint the audience who are also participants in the conference about publishing and the particular journals that you are handling, I would like to ask you, what's the shortest period of time that you've encountered since a submission was made to seeing its final form in an issue? And as a counterpoint, what's the longest time that it took for someone since submission to actual publication, so that the audience could have an idea of, time, what we're talking about time in this particular question. Anyone would like to start? Nassef, how about you? So since you just started this journal, what's the shortest period of time since an author submitted to its final acceptance, and what's the longest?
The time that articles are accepted or after layers of reviews have been done. Most probably, I think, uh, depending on the review times, I think it will take around 6 weeks.
Wow. All right.
No, not accepted for publication, but
Alright,
accepted
alright.
for review.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Vincenz, you were raising your hand so a while ago.
Yeah, I have already answer for that, no? But I had a feeling it would be asked. The shortest time was, yeah, the shortest time was 6 months. The longest time was around 2 years. And talagang dinugo namin ng author yung 6 years na yun. Yung 2 years na yun.
All right.
2
Yeah, 2
years.
years.
2 years. All right.
The 6 months was a confluence already of first it was parang near publishable already to begin with. So it was already a plus na maganda na yung manuscript nung nakuha namin. Secondly, the second part of the confluence was mabilis yung turnaround ng reviewers. So it helped. Like in journal work, as we know, parang it's touch and go with reviewers, no? Parang you tell them 4 to 6 weeks, it turns out 4 to 6 months, and so on and so forth. Diba? So parang these are like the variables, diba? The unforeseeables, as it were. The 2 years, combination na talaga siya ng busy yung reviewers, busy yung author, pero pagbabalikan namin as editors to inquire, are you still interested? Interested naman siya. So, yun, I suppose, nandun na rin yung motivation ng author to see the whole process through. Okay? It's clear to me also when I say this is the editorial process. Okay? Because once it's accepted, there's an additional 1 to 2 months of production work. Diba? So that means, as I mentioned, the copy editing, the proofreading. But ang pinakamahalaga, syempre, accepted na siya. May acceptance letter na, and then, yun. Yeah.
May question ako kay Vince actually. So, ilan ba yung limit, ilan ang limit ng pages ng KK nga? I mean, how many articles? Because di ba you come out only once a year? Tas sobrang laki, di ba? Parang 800 pages. Twice a year na ba? Okay.
Yeah, twice a year. Yeah. I think these are the uses and abuses of online publishing. Kasi parang nainganyo talaga magsulat. Kasi we're not thinking of, printed pages eh. Walang overhead for papel, walang overhead for imprenta, for storage. Parang we don't think about that, diba? And pag medyo enthusiastic yung guest editors, medyo enthusiastic yung editorial board, parang ang daming natatanggap, which we can't say naman ipagpaliban na natin sa future issue, diba? Kasi natanggap na and things like that. So in this sense, Patrick, technically there's no limit sa page count, because we're not governed by those limitations. But our journal's office has advised us for metrics purposes, and then naman the H indexes, like how many articles are cited by how many times and stuff like that. It has been explained to us that the more entries we put in, the less chances of having a good metrics, diba? We will have. So parang babalansehin mo rin yun. Diba? So, yeah, that's the long and the short of it. So, parang nung in-explain sa amin na parang, may factor pala yung sa H-index, yung number of entries na pinapublish nyo. Parang napaisip kami. Yun. So, yeah.
All right. I hope, Sir Patrick, you're not avoiding the question.
No, I asked that because, pag nakikita ko yung lumalabas yung KK, tapos dinownload mo yung buo, parang, wow, 800 pages or 600 pages. So, and I asked that also because it has something to do with turnaround. I think tama yun eh. Editorial process, nag-average sa over 6 months to a little less than a year. Yan yung average. So, but the turnaround to get to seeing it in print or seeing it published takes longer because may limits yung kaya namin i-publish na number of articles per issue or per number. And so to me, that's I didn't really give tips earlier, no, but I think that this is very important. If some people are trying to get published for tenure, no, don't put all your eggs in one basket, no. So because sometimes tapos mo na yung editorial process, pero wala pang paglalagyan yun na issue, no. In fact, we're trying to explore with Plaridel this idea of advanced publication of articles na wala pang bahay, no? So, but we haven't really completely figured it out, or have decided kung gagawin namin. Pero that happens a lot with volume, no? So, Humanities Diliman, for example, we receive so many submissions, and then we accept X number of papers, pero gaano katagal bago siya lalabas. So, I would say for sure over a year, sometimes a year and a half, bago mo makita yung paper mo lumabas, kahit tapos na siya much earlier. So, but before we used to receive this much volume, you could see your paper out, tama yun, 6 months. Kasi di ba, biannual or semi-annual, right? So, in the old days before we were Scopus or anything, so you could see your paper in the next issue. Kung yung special issue na yon ay nandun yung radio history, and your paper is on radio history, you could see your paper na in the coming no? So pero hindi na masyado ganyan ngayon because of the volume.
All right. Dr. Grace?
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, the average is 6 months. Longer is, of course, more than 6 months to a year. But ideally, it can be accepted if the reviewers submit on time, and if authors revise on time, submit it on the deadline, follow the deadlines. I think in less than 4 months, it can be ready for production. It can go to it has been accepted, and then it will be forwarded to the layout artist, and then it will be uploaded.
All right.
I have one last question about maybe reviewers, because there's been a lot of talk, especially on Twitter, about reviewers who are discriminatory. So there have been reviewers who have said, well, you're not a native speaker, so go get a native speaker to help you with your work, or we can't accept papers from this particular country. And there are also a lot of younger scholars who get reviews that are a bit pointed or a bit crude or a bit rude, everything in between. And this discourages them from publishing more, or even wanting to submit to the journal ever again. So you as editors, what kind of power do you have over such reviews and reviewers? Is there a point where you've had a reviewer where you think, my goodness, this person has either not read the paper or is being very unreasonable? And what do you do in those cases?
All right. Who would like to start? Yes, Vince.
Thankfully our reviewers are not that discriminatory, but they can get harsh with their comments. So that's where I myself, as EIC, I instruct our managing editors to kind of like take the sharp edge off, either by paraphrasing, diba? Parang paraphrasing or diba? Parang a mix already of paraphrases and choice direct quotes from the reviewer, diba? Para hindi naman kasuklam-suklam dun sa author pag binasa yung, diba, yung raw review. So to answer Frankie's question, that's where I think we as editors can intervene. Okay, so we don't necessarily have to deliver in toto what the reviewer said. We can deliver the gist of it, paraphrase some bits and pieces, directly quote some bits and pieces, but in a sense make it more acceptable to the author.
Yeah, kami din ganun. I agree. So I also do that a lot. There are a lot of harsh comments that they never get to the author exactly as it was written. There have been instances where a specific point that Frankie raised is the reviewer did seem to have read the paper. So we almost never, I think I've never fought with any of the reviewers, like have had any heated argument. What we do is we find another reviewer. It just makes the process longer, but well, we tell them that we were, in so many words, unhappy with what had happened, but we just find another reviewer. And this is also the case with not just people who didn't seem to have read the paper, but also for instances where I, as an editor, or the other reviewer, in case of two reviewers, would be in disagreement. So it's really best to get another reviewer, just to be very sure that you are looking at this paper objectively, like get another pair of eyes to look at them. The worst, of course, but again, we've not entered any heated discussion, is that if they put you off for a long time and then they give this very bad review, right? I mean, you made us wait for like 5 months, and then this is your review, like 2 sentences, right? I mean, how dare you, right? But
True.
I can't really do much about that except like just move on and find find a better reviewer for this paper.
All right. Nassef, would you like to add anything?
Not so much to add. I think, yeah, we did experience that kind of treatment. But my strategy is really inviting, I think, not two reviewers at the start, but I invite 6 reviewers. And depends who will accept that. If 3 or 4 accepted it, and that's better, because the turnaround of responses are varies. Um, yeah, I think there is something. I also want to ask questions to you guys, since you're more established in established journals. Do you think that academic journals is sustainable uh, against the dominance of think tanks publications, of magazines that are more highly cited, for example, international relations, foreign policy, foreign affairs, although these are not academic journals, but they are very much out there, highly cited and read by many people across social strata. Um, so how do you view that? How can academic journals evolve if we also accept practitioners' pieces that are not so much into academic writing? Um, so how does academic journals see their sustainability in the future with regards to the dominance of these? Even in public intellectuals, you can see many public intellectuals who are actually not public intellectuals, not based on academic training, but because they are the one who are sought after by media people, and most of their writings are opinion editorials or in op-eds which is very much accessible to the public than the academic journals.
All right. Vincenz?
Ako talagang start.
Yeah.
um, yeah, tough question. Just speaking from the experience of KK, as we mentioned, our core task really is journals publication. But running alongside journal publication is hosting a lot of other live events, which complement journal publication. And we've gone also as far as like hosting or co-hosting conferences, workshops, and so on and so forth. To our mind, I think that's part and parcel of the knowledge production, the so-called knowledge production that we do in the humanities. It so happens that journal articles are one form of knowledge production, but it does not stop KK from doing other forms of knowledge production, such as events, conferences, workshops. We ventured into podcasts. Then some of our literary readings have been in the form of podcasts, Q&As, and things like that. Diba? So, yeah, so maybe that's a long-winded answer to Nassef's question. Just to say, of course, finally, diba, it's hard. Diba? Parang if journal publication is hard enough, think about running events pa. But it diba, parang if we're industry minded when it comes to these things, it puts the name out, diba? Parang it keeps us in the conversation. Okay, but it's quite taxing, and kasi we're also teachers, no? It's quite taxing, diba? Labor intensive work.
All right. Professor Campos.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to that earlier question about H indexes and all these things, right? So, um, it's very tricky to be publishing a journal in the humanities and cultural studies, for example, because if we're looking for sustainability in terms of citation and influence, because we're not the sciences, right? So this comes up a lot in university debates, right? So for example, you'd have a paper in the sciences that would prove this or that, and it will get this much citation because it's science, right? So humanities, you write an interpretation of a novel, and no one really cites your interpretation of that novel, right? So if we measure it by like how many people cite your interpretation of a visual art or a work, a piece of art, well, that will really be very difficult. So we don't even like think in those terms at all. Although I noticed that just looking at Pelikula, Plaridel, and Humanities Diliman, that if you have um, more focused issues, uh, in the case of Plaridel, for example, we have very specific special issues. For example, archival crisis in Southeast Asia. I mean, very rarely will you find a group of papers pulled together talking about this issue. So this one gets cited a lot, right? So if you have, for example, Southeast Asia is a great area to produce knowledge in because very little studies. For example, fandom in Southeast Asia. Fandom in general, like Korean pop and all these things, you'll have a lot of papers on this. But fandom in Southeast Asia, then you have something that people go to your journal for. In Humanities Diliman, we would have less of this because it's quite general, although its strength is that it publishes papers on, well, relatively obscure topics on Philippine matters, right? So, for example, practice of this provincial town in doing this performance. So you'll never find it anywhere else, but it's quite, you have to be looking for it, right? And you'll find it in Humanities Diliman. So I think the mindset of getting citations from humanities journals is really a doom. I mean, it's a doom prospect from the beginning. I don't know though for religious studies, for example, divinity, or if this has more traffic in terms of readers and citation. But humanities, I won't bet on it.
All right. Professor Grace messaged me, and she said she had to attend to something urgent. Anyway, just a last point before we end this session. Maybe I'd like to end on a chummy note. What message do you have for those young academics, or maybe even the senior ones, who are looking into publishing? What advice can you give? Maybe we start with Nassef this time.
Do not be afraid in contacting the editors. There is a certain kind of culture in the global south that and familiarity on which journals that their work should be put into. Uh, uh, you are free to contact the editors, email them, and ask them if this is a kind of a research that your journal would like to has a potential to be welcome and accommodated in your journal, and from there we can work into your research. As I would like to reiterate my point is that I'm not really into the Western standards. I'm really into looking at regional research, emphasizing in our journal the Muslim experience, how Muslims have contributed in knowledge creation, different from the Western standard or the European standard of rationality or reason or rational knowledge is superior than faith-based knowledge, which is incompatible to the West Muslim experience. That there is a complementary between faith-based knowledge and also rational knowledge, as put forth in the message in the Quran. Yes, I think that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Vincenz?
Okay. Just a few points lang. No? First and foremost, the non-negotiable is like be an excellent researcher. Parang it begins from that, no? Parang we're at this day and age now where, of course, you do research, but you still have to decide on what form, what medium, what channel you want to convey your research in, di ba? Yeah, ang daming possibilities there, di ba? But I think at the core of it is um, do excellent research. That's one. Secondly, if you do decide not to venture into journal publication, the topic of this webinar, I think revision is the key. Diba? Parang what you submit 6 months prior, diba? 6 months later when you see your readers reports, it's like, oh no, parang you'll really transform your journal article into something you may never have imagined, no? At the start, when you embarked on your journey 6 months previous before receiving your reviewers' reports. And finally, and this is our realization nga, over the past few years when we see our metrics, when we see our readers, wow, binabasa pala tayo in these countries. And wow, may nagsasubmit pala from these countries. Diba? So, given the online environment of academic publication, especially if you're publishing in an open access journal, you'll be surprised with regard to who your readers are and could be. Diba? So in that sense, diba, parang sure, of course you're working with Philippine topics, you're working with more broadly Southeast Asian topics, but your work gets, traverses, okay, other contexts.
All right. Thank you. Professor Campos.
Okay, ako pang round up siguro, Nassef was talking about the framework and Vince was talking about revision. Sa akin, mahalaga yung how you take rejection. Rejection is really part of this process. Hindi ko alam yung statistic, but I would guess lahat ng currently published authors dumaan sa period of rejection, or hanggang ngayon siguro dumadaan pa, no? And it's really that's the reality of publishing in journals. Journals have to reject papers for very practical reasons, but also you get rejected at a certain point in your career as a scholar because, well, your paper was not ready, right? So and this, I'm speaking both from both sides, having been rejected as an author before and like hating all the reviewers and all the comments, and then years later thinking back that how correct the reviewer was and how bad the paper really was, and seeing it from the editorial side where you really have to relay the bad news and say, I'm sorry, this paper is rejected. Learning to accept that and moving forward is really very, very important. Meaning, don't stop. I mean, you have to try again. You have to improve. You have to work on. And from personal experience, most of these previously rejected papers that I had, which I kept, were somehow revived at some point later in my career when I had more wisdom and I had more research and I had, which means you just have to persist. It is part of the reality of journal publishing that you will get rejected. It's so painful to receive harsh comments and also to receive a rejection letter. So if you stop there because you're so thin-skinned, then that's it. But if you like keep on and move forward, then you'll get there then.
All right. It's like, don't be afraid, do good research, and be ready for rejection and trust the process. All right. So with that, I think we can end this session. We'd like to thank Nassef, Patrick, and Vincenz for gracing us. And of course, a while ago, Dr. Grace Barretto-Tesoro